Hello, welcome everyone. I am Chris Hyams, CEO of Indeed, and welcome to the next installment of Here to Help. This is our look at how Indeed has been navigating the global impact of COVID-19. Today is June 22nd. We are on day 111 of global work from home. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Maggie Hulce, Indeed's general manager for our enterprise business. Maggie is also the executive sponsor for our Veterans and Allies Inclusion Resource Group, and you'll hear a bit more about that in a bit. Maggie's been with Indeed for a little over 4 years now, and until quarantine, worked out of our Stamford, Connecticut office. Maggie, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start off first with how are you doing right now?
Well, I feel really grateful in this moment to have had such a nice Father's Day yesterday with my parents, my brother's family, and our family. My brother has 3 kids under the age of 7. We have 4 kids ranging from ages 4 to 11. And before COVID, we'd all get together often. And after so many months of being apart, it was so nice to get together in person to celebrate Father's Day, even though we were still keeping our distance outside in the backyard. It was great. I hope you had a nice Father's Day as well.
It was lovely. Yeah, very fortunate to have my 2 grown girls at home with us since quarantine, and so we had a really nice family day. So let's start with, you've been with Indeed now for, as I said, a little over 4 years, and you've had a number of different roles here. We can talk about that in a little bit, but let's back up first and just tell us a little bit about your career before Indeed.
So much of my early career was as a consultant at McKinsey, which was an incredible education and experience, learning how to solve many different types of problems for large organizations. And after McKinsey, I spent around 5 years at Google in the sales strategy and operations function, focused on growing Google's core advertising business for large customers. Now, my other area of interest has been workforce development, how improving, access to and training for good jobs changes lives and communities. I spent 1 year before business school working for the New York City Economic Development Corporation, focused on some of the most challenged areas of Brooklyn and the Bronx. And I've also advised social impact businesses focused on helping people with barriers to employment, homelessness, criminal backgrounds get into living wage jobs. So, as I think about it, both of these areas of focus from my time before Indeed, helping enterprise customers and helping people connect with jobs, now are part of my day-to-day at Indeed.
That's great. So what led you to Indeed?
Well, I joined Indeed to build the sales strategy and product commercialization functions. And, as I was evaluating the opportunity, it was a chance to take on a senior role at an earlier stage company, to work with what I perceived to be a great leadership team, which fortunately has turned out to be true, to drive innovation in an enormous industry. I did not appreciate or understand how huge this industry was until my conversations with Indeed. And I was also really drawn to Indeed's mission to help people get jobs. As I said before, I believe giving people access to jobs and helping them see what's possible is so important for our society. And I've seen a lot of organizations with pretty inspiring mission statements, but very few live it the way Indeed does. So after 3 years in sales strategy, I did transition to become the GM of Enterprise, where I'm really focused on shaping product and go-to-market priorities for our largest customers. And as you mentioned, I'm also the exec sponsor for the Vets and Allies IRG. I'm also a military spouse, so this has, a lot of meaning for me and has been another great experience.
So in previous episodes of Here to Help, we've talked some about the inclusion resource groups, or IRGs, at Indeed, and they really have 2 different roles. One is internally focused on trying to create a sense of belonging for our employees and creating awareness for other employees about issues that are faced by different groups. But the second and maybe even more vital goal is to take that awareness and use that to help more people get jobs. And so can you talk a little bit about how the Vets and the Allies group has helped Indeed help veterans and active duty military find work and helped employers hire them?
So, there's a number of resources that we've worked on to help veterans and active military find jobs on Indeed. Some of that is just helping them understand how to navigate what we already have, how to do a job search, how to create a profile with Indeed. We also, now 2 years ago, partnered with an organization called Hiring Our Heroes. That's part of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and their focus is to help connect veterans, active duty military, and military spouses to employment. And so that's been a great partnership. And we're a member of the Veterans Employment Advisory Council alongside many other large enterprise organizations who are passionate about veterans. Now, as part of that partnership, we've seen there's a lot of opportunity to help veterans just understand what's out there. There was a lot of sort of training and advice being given to veteran populations that didn't even mention that Indeed existed. So that was an opportunity for us to make sure veterans knew we were there. And we've taken a variety of approaches. We've done things as customized as sort of one-on-one counseling sessions with individual veterans. That's been a program that has been tested recently with the job seeker team, running webinars, bringing veterans and active duty military into our offices to help run workshops for them. There's been a variety of things that we've tried. And, it's an area of continued investment. Now, if you think about the employer side, over the past year and a half, we've worked on making sure all of our solutions can actually work to help them connect with veterans. So we have employers who think about it through the lens of branding. We now have the ability to actually target veterans with sponsored jobs, targeted ads. We've always made veterans free to reach out to in resume. So that's yet another place where, we've made it possible to find and connect with veterans. And, we've seen a lot of success with hiring events as well. So really, there's a lot of variety in what employers can do as they're trying to connect with veterans on our platform. And I think the last thing I just want to add is we have such an amazing, passionate group of people as part of the Veterans and Allies IRG, and they've been such a pleasure to work with.
You've had a really interesting career and you've done a number of different things. We've touched on some of them. Can you talk a little bit about your approach to career development and how you think about leadership?
So as I think about the decisions I've made with my career so far, there are a few consistent questions I've asked myself. First, am I having impact in this role for my clients, my organization, my peers, generally with the orientation to want to help others succeed? The second, do I get to solve hard problems in this role? My dad, who's on my mind, obviously after Father's Day, used to say to me all the time, every problem has a solution. Some just take longer to find. And that sticks with me. I think of it often. The third question, am I learning? I had a mentor tell me once, you should always feel uncomfortable, a little bit uncomfortable in your role. And if you're not, you're probably not learning anymore. The fourth, do I enjoy the people I work with? We spend so much time with the people we work with. It really is important that it's, somewhat pleasant. And am I finding any meaning or sense of purpose in what I'm doing? And I've generally found if I start to struggle with any of those questions, it's time to make a change. Now, on the part of your question about my approach to leadership, I think about it as, wanting to inspire people to drive meaningful change together. And what does that mean? It means, across the organization, across the teams, the expectation that we should be constantly innovating, challenging the status quo, and doing so with optimism that things can change, right? Every problem has a solution. Some just take longer to find. I want to be getting the best of all the brains, as I like to say, in the organization, recognizing and having everyone feel that great ideas can come from anywhere or anyone. And then, I think about giving people opportunities to grow and learn, as so many others have done for me.
What are some of the key lessons that you've learned in this process?
So many lessons. A couple things. I think the importance of building teams with really diverse capabilities and then using that diversity to your advantage. So, triangulating perspectives, making sure your team, welcomes debate with each other and doesn't shy away from it. They teach you as a consultant to look for disconfirming data. You can always find data to prove your argument, but go hunt for the disconfirming data. So I also think about just the importance of looking for who is the dissenter in whatever's being proposed and what did they have to say. I think that's been an important one. The importance of communication. And maybe when I first started my career, I thought it was mainly about top-down clarity of what you were saying. And I appreciate now more and more the importance of taking people along the journey with you. And lastly, that a lot of our decision-making isn't based on logic. And that was a hard one for me to learn early on, but has been, really important for knowing how to influence and drive change.
In your current role as a GM for our enterprise business, your job is to understand the mindset of the largest organizations in the world and how they think about hiring. And not just how they think about hiring now, but how they think about adapting as the world is evolving. And there's been more evolution in the last few months than maybe in the last decade before that. So among these recent events, the pandemic, the recession, Black Lives Matter, how have you observed or heard that these things are changing the way these companies are thinking? Well,
of course, when you're talking about like global enterprises, which, we define it Indeed as those with more than 1,000 employees, you're going to see a lot of variation in how the economic and social environment is affecting them. And, in enterprise, we've thought about our vision to become an essential partner to these organizations in every industry to help them make great hires for all their roles. But in this moment, with so much uncertainty all around us, we have been approaching our clients with this simple question: how can we help? The name of the series, right? How can we help? And there's a lot of variation in their answers. So for those who had to lay off significant proportions of their staff, they wanted help to offboard employees and help them find bridge opportunities. And since we're always focused, first and foremost on job seekers at Indeed, we of course wanted to make sure we were doing everything we could to help these newly unemployed individuals find work. For those who were still hiring, some with a lot of urgency for essential or frontline roles, some of the things we heard included, how do I, convey to my prospective employees how I'm going to keep them safe from COVID? I need to learn how to screen and interview virtually, and it's entirely new for my organization. I have to screen massive inflows in applications, which has now completely outstripped my team's capability. And we heard, look, finding candidates for these hard to fill locations and roles is still a challenge. It was a challenge before, and it's a challenge now.
So those are the questions that have come up. So what are some of the things that your team has done to help these employers adapt to these new realities?
Yeah, so, our team, and certainly in partnership with teams across Indeed, we've been listening to their answers, adjusting existing solutions and creating new ones to try to start to address their needs. For those who had to let go of employees, we created a new solution called Indeed Next to help companies, offboard those employees and guide them to find jobs on Indeed, set up job alerts, create a profile to help employers find them. To those employers who had the branding concerns, we made an easy way for companies to share their COVID approach on their company page. To help the job seekers urgently looking for employment connect with those employers who were urgently hiring, we created a way for job seekers to indicate that they were ready to work in any role and made those job seekers discoverable and free to reach out to an Indeed resume. I remember when Brendan Sturd did this interview earlier on, I think he mentioned we had something like 600,000 profiles, and we're now up to 5 million that have been updated with that ready to work tag. And 1 million of them have found a match with an employer reaching out to them on resume. So then for the companies who were struggling with how to interview virtually, we took our hiring event solution, formerly focused on in-person events, and pivoted to virtual hiring events, and have seen adoption scale pretty quickly since then. For those who are trying to solve for those hard to fill roles, we've tested using invite to apply to help them in new ways. And lastly, for the organizations who really wanted a lot more help with the sourcing and the screening and the selection, we've offered to make Hire, our end-to-end solution, a little bit more configurable for clients to align with what they needed in this moment. Now, I want to add that as part of this effort to help, we've also reached out to governments and organizations hiring essential workers, offering, philanthropic support in a variety of ways. A few examples: we've partnered closely with the National Health Service in the UK, NHS, to help with some of their urgent hiring needs. And this has been an area where it's been so inspiring to see so many of our functions in Indeed going above and beyond to help. Sales and client success, our strategy teams, our technical teams, all working together to help in this moment. In the US, we've offered free sourcing help and free resume licenses for New York State nursing homes. New York nursing homes were particularly hard hit by COVID, I think, as many know. We've also offered free virtual events to help with critical hiring needs in states where Indeed has a significant footprint. So we've run events already in New York, in Connecticut, and Dallas-Fort Worth just last week. And we've had roughly 175 employers participate in those events, driving 32,000 RSVPs, and so far 1,000 hires and counting. So that's been one of the areas that we've been really excited to see work so well for so many of our employers. And we plan to continue it. So later this month, we have a free event planned to help with contact tracing roles. In July, we'll hold our first event in Europe, in Germany. And in the fall, we're thinking about, how we can take the same model and help get all parts of the US back to work.
You mentioned a lot of different things in there. Maybe we'll sort of take a little time on some of them. So you talked about virtual hiring events, and we've had a product for the last couple of years focused on in-person events, Indeed hiring events. And obviously when quarantine first hit, the number of people who wanted to cram a bunch of people together in a small space to interview them dropped off pretty quickly. And that team pivoted really quickly to bring that all online. Can you talk just a little bit about these virtual events and how they're being used right now?
So before COVID, it's right, Indeed hiring events primarily focused on physical events, and we would drive candidates who met the employer screener criteria to a physical location for in-person interviews. And just as context, we did 24,000 events last year with clients across North America, UK, and Ireland, driving tens of thousands of hires. So this was a fairly established product. But yes, after COVID, we quickly pivoted to offer virtual events with essentially the same benefits, driving interested and screened candidates into slots for virtual interviews. And, the first approach has been to allow clients to bring their own interviewing platform. Some already had one, and some, quickly adopted Zoom or Microsoft Teams, Skype, or another video solution. And year to date, we've had now more than 500 clients hold a virtual event with us in this way. And we've also been working hard to make it possible all around the world. So in addition to the countries I mentioned before, we've added Germany, Netherlands, France, and Italy, and are testing, variations of it in India right now as well. The solution has worked really well for roles with straightforward screening requirements like frontline retail, but it also really works for more complex requirements, and clients don't always realize that. So for example, we've seen, software development positions requiring security clearance also have really successful virtual events. I think another thing that's worth noting is that many of the companies and the job seekers trying virtual events in this moment are way out of their comfort zone. They've never done this before. So, we've seen some of those challenges as part of the events, and we've been working on new ways to support both job seekers and employers to make sure they're comfortable with the process, with the technology, so it can be a smooth interview for them. And, we've also had a couple clients just opt to do phone interviews, and that also works. I think the last thing I'll add is we've had many clients tell us that they would prefer to just have an integrated solution so they didn't have to bring their own platform, didn't have to buy one, didn't have to download it. And they really wanted to solve some of the problems related to the challenges with the technology adoption. So that feedback was part of why the team set out to build our own interviewing platform.
So let's talk a little bit about, we set out not very long ago to take all of this feedback and just throw a team at, let's build our own platform that is deeply integrated with the hiring events system. What are some of the things that we've seen and learned through that process?
Well, as I mentioned before, I think clients appreciate having a solution that can schedule a desired number of interviews with screened candidates without needing to buy or download any additional software. We've also heard clients tell us they value ease of use and the fact that this solution was really designed to support interviewing versus some of the other solutions were designed more for meetings. The solution is also really flexible, and we're seeing some clients use it to simplify the scheduling of a first phone screen on an ongoing basis. So for example, I want to do an interview every Tuesday and Thursday for 2 hours with qualified candidates, and I just want it on my calendar on an ongoing basis. That, as well as, allowing your team to do same day offers at scale, it has, the ability to think about it either way. So it's really, it's allowing clients their ability to adjust how they want to hire at any scale. And we're also trying to improve the experience for job seekers. So, it's a benefit to not have to download an app. You can just click into an interview. And we think that's part of the reason why we're seeing higher show rates than what we're seeing with some of the other interviewing platforms. And there's also a lobby for the job seekers to check into. So it's a little bit more clear what's happening as they wait for an interview to begin. And that also helps with the experience. I think, lastly for us, given that we are now controlling the experience more end to end, we're in a better position to, learn from and optimize the experience for both job seekers and employers. So ultimately we can, get to better hiring outcomes over time.
So when you were talking about some of the challenges that are not necessarily new, but that are more meaningful right now to employers and they're adapting. One of them was that not everyone's hiring, but the ones that are hiring have a whole lot more to do, and in some case with, not enough or even reduced staff. And so one of the things that's really exciting to me about hiring events is it just cuts out a huge amount of, the amount of work that normally goes into sourcing candidates, screening them, and then getting them to set up an interview. We're just going directly to setting up that interview. Now, one of the other things, and you mentioned this before, Indeed Hire is another service that we have that really just sort of takes on a lot of the work that typically an employer would have to do on their own. Can you talk a little bit more about Indeed Hire and how that is helping support our clients right now?
Definitely. So, Indeed Hire is, for those of you who don't know, our end-to-end recruiting service that takes advantage of Indeed's scale, technology, and our expertise. And the idea is to deliver an easy and affordable pay-per-hire solution. And, we have the ability to help clients in a number of ways with the help of recruiting specialists who really understand what the client is solving for. And that can include, helping optimize their job descriptions, the requirements, how they might think about salary and the trade-offs with candidate flow, sourcing and screening candidates for the client to deliver a qualified shortlist for their review, helping with interview scheduling across, whoever in the business is engaging with hiring these particular roles, and, through to offer management support. And so again, it has the ability to adjust to what the clients are looking for. And in this moment, as we've been doing with everything with Hire Now, we're trying to listen carefully to the clients and understand what's most important to them. For some, what they actually need help with right now is helping with screening and selecting from candidates that are already in their ATS. And so, for example, we worked with a national grocer in this way, helping develop custom screening for more than 30,000 applicants already in their ATS, so they could quickly hire delivery drivers and in-store shoppers. But for some organizations, what they've wanted is, faster times to hire. As a different example, we worked with an insurance company hiring telemarketers and helped them reduce their time to hire to under 2 weeks. So, we've seen the solution really work well for a variety of roles and industries, whether it's retail, healthcare, sales and customer service, call centers, manufacturing or warehouse roles. But in this moment, what we're really focused on with Hire as an end-to-end solution is, partnering with our largest clients and trying to understand what improvements they want to drive and then working together to achieve it. And again, we've got a lot of different ways that we can help. And so we're excited about the potential to help transform how clients hire in partnership with them.
So one of the things that we've talked about a lot in this series is how there are a handful of things that we've been working on that we've thought of as part of the future, and that it might take 5 or 10 years for people to adapt, kind of like your dad's line that sometimes you might even find the solution and people might not be ready for it. You just have to kind of wait and help them along. And then when circumstances change radically, like they have just in the last few months, that suddenly things that seemed more futuristic are needed right now. And we've obviously done a whole lot to try to adapt to these changing times. When you think about how quickly these things have changed, what are some of the things that you see as being lasting changes, not just shifting to adapt now, but what are some of the things that we've just sort of brought in that will be different going forward?
Well, if I think about, what we're hearing from our conversations with clients, I think two themes, big themes that I think, at least I see. One, there's a lot of focus on efficiency. And yes, it's driven by the economic uncertainty, but I do think that in a moment like this, you see organizations make changes that stick. And so some of the questions I've heard clients say just in meetings over the last 2 weeks, how do I know if I'm spending my advertising and sourcing dollars in the most intelligent way? How do I think about the right number of, TA or recruiters that I should have in my organization? I have, clients are telling us that they've threaded together many different pieces of technology for their recruiting processes and are questioning whether they're actually delivering the value as expected. And so I do think that in this moment, some of those, that awareness and the focus, that some of those changes will stick. I think there's also a lot of reflection on how to use this moment to change some of the approaches to how they hire. So, a lot of conversations about how we can all start to hire more without bias, building more diverse and inclusive teams. I'm really optimistic that organizations will make a shift in this moment, given all of the debate and conversation about this going on really all over the world. There's a question about what parts of our process should stay virtual or streamlined forever. And this one I'm also really optimistic about. It's funny, many of the clients have said that they thought that their organizations would never change anything about sort of their in-person cadence for how they did things until they had 1 week to figure it out, and then they changed it. And so, the ability to see how efficient virtual interviewing can be, or having more automation for some parts of the process, I think will stick. And then lastly, I think all of us, maybe including here at Indeed, we've been maybe a little surprised at how well remote work has actually worked. And, we hear it across clients from all types of industries. So in this moment, there's a lot of discussion around, okay, if we're going to have remote or work from home options, how is it going to change the way we think about recruitment? And how is it going to change the way we think about retention? Because now, employees who you might have thought, as not being necessarily open to working for an organization on the other side of the world, perhaps now could. And so a lot of interesting discussion, I think, reflecting on how to make remote a new, sort of the new normal, at least for parts of their organizations.
Yeah, we've had this theme internally that the future is now, and how do we think about things that way? And just the last thing you said got me thinking, even just about when you come to Indeed.com as a job seeker, there's a what and a where. What are you looking for and where? And that where, might not be at the same level as the what in the future. And that's so obviously we have to adapt to this. And so what you talked about is some of the changes that will be lasting for employers and how they hire. What has changed, or what do you see that will continue to change about how we partner with our clients, and especially with enterprises?
Yeah. So, for how we help drive greater efficiency, right? Our goal has been to be our client's number one source of hire with the lowest cost per hire. And in a moment of focus on efficiency, we genuinely believe we can help clients transform their hiring processes to make them dramatically better. And, many companies haven't historically thought of Indeed as a place to come to conduct interviews or make hires, but it's now how we're working with many of our largest clients. And, we're really excited about the potential to, work with them in those fundamentally new ways. I think for how we can help innovate the approaches to hiring, we certainly want to be part of the solution for how companies hire without bias. The global protests and conversations about racial injustice have been, for so many people, a wake-up call. And I am really optimistic that employers, enterprise employers, but also small employers of all sizes, will use this moment to be more fair in how they hire at all levels of their organization. Every single employer I've talked to about this says they know this is important, and they know they have to do better because they know that there's still a lot of bias in how hires are made. And it's been interesting as we talk about our new virtual interviewing solution and explain to clients, okay, you're just going to tell us the criteria for the first interview and we're going to do the rest. We're sort of finding that together we can prevent an otherwise, qualified candidate from being rejected based on, their name, their address, their age, or school before they had that first opportunity to meet with someone. And, we're describing that to clients, and you can see it registering with them as something that could potentially make a really big difference. It's, of course, not enough to get rid of all of the bias in hiring, but it's a start. And, it's led to a number of pretty constructive conversations about how we can work together to do better here. So that's bias. I think in terms of the trend of embracing virtual hiring, as we've talked about before, we're investing heavily to allow clients to do more of their hiring processes with us virtually in fundamentally more streamlined ways. And we'll continue to improve the ways we do that. But, we've made a lot of progress in a very short period of time. And last, as it relates to hiring remote workers, Indeed, we have the largest global footprint of job seekers. And so we actually have a unique ability to help companies approach hiring remote talent in new ways. And I think that's another challenge we need to think about for how to make that even better for clients thinking about it in new ways.
To wrap things up a little bit, it's nice to hear some optimism, especially now when there's so much going on that has people anxious or afraid or unsure about the future. And you talked about some optimism for what might happen in the world of hiring and on the business side. Is there anything, just in closing, on a personal level that you have seen that has left you personally optimistic about the months and years ahead?
I would say for me personally, the experience of my husband and I both working from home has been really illuminating. Two areas I'll mention here. First, we think about all of the travel we've been doing for the last 15 years and all of the hours we logged on airplanes sometimes flying halfway around the world for a half-day meeting, and wonder, was that really necessary? And while it definitely hasn't been easy to navigate work from home and trying to, do school from home with 4 kids, ages 4 to 11, we as a family are all together so much more often, and that has been really wonderful. So, I am optimistic personally that on the other side of this global work from home, experiment, we'll all be more judicious about when we really should be traveling, when we really need the travel to have an effective discussion. I think the second thing for me personally is, we're finding in this moment that we're connecting more often with friends and, people that we care about than we were before. We've literally connected with people, in a Zoom meeting that we hadn't seen in more than 5 years. And it was so easy to do. And so we think why haven't we done this? Why didn't we do this sooner? So I guess I am really optimistic that this experience for all of us will lead us to connect more openly and more often with each other. And I think we're already finding it's helping us become better friends and, better parents and probably, better leaders over time if we're doing that well.
Great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. It's really inspiring to see just how much has really happened in just a very short period of time, and thinking about where we can go and how many people we can help over the coming months and years. It's really exciting. So thanks again, Maggie, for your time today.
My pleasure.